Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the incredible Eric Morin.
Incredible this week. All right.
The incredible. It's been a while, so I was like, let's spice it up a little bit. We've had quite a bit of things going on the last couple of weeks. I know you just got back from Arizona with your select group of doctors. How'd that go?
You know, and we're going to talk about mindset a little bit today. You and I talked before the show about what we want to talk about, and it's so interesting to watch the mindset of the best, and listen to the way they talk, the way they act, what makes them different and unique. And it's something I see a lot of the top people. And so it was an amazing trip. It was one of those trips where, I did not plan a lot of personal time, and I wish I had, because the weather was amazing. I love Arizona, and I was like, what am I doing? But I did stay focused and work the whole time, and then got back on a flight and came home. But great group of doctors, great trip, and we'll talk about that today.
Back at it. And, one of the reasons why I asked that question is because we are going to get a little bit into mindset. And one of the things that, has been in the marketplace right now, it's a pretty big story. For those of you guys that don't know, Joe Rogan has his podcast. Obviously, it's the #1 podcast in the world. Spotify acquired his podcast for a large sum of money. And more recently, people have been irritated with the fact that he's, I guess, promoting misinformation in the marketplace, almost to the point where people are trying to cancel him. Doctors are reaching out, signing petitions. These irrelevant artists are coming out nowadays and like saying, oh, I'm pulling my music from it and all of this. And Joe Rogan came out and said, I'm just having a conversation with someone. My job is to bring on people that think differently in the marketplace and just pick their brain. It's not me promoting anything, but the main point that I'm driving at is mindset. These people are letting something that is probably 45 minutes long, 2 to 3 times a week, maybe 1 time a day. I don't know that much about the Joe Rogan podcast when he releases episodes, but it's like controlling their life. It's ruining their life so much that they have to sign these petitions, go out of their way, post these blogs. It's all over the media. It's like a huge story right now. So I want you to touch a little bit on how doctors can control their mindset to ultimately affect their practice, because this is a big thing.
Well, okay, if you're a Neil Young fan, sorry about this. So you're rocking in the free world or whatever. But, if the Beatles had come out or something, if Paul McCartney had said they were pulling their catalog, it might have been a little bit more significant, right?
Yeah.
But it's not as significant when you haven't had a hit in 45 years. But I would say that's not, by the way, see, someone's already offended. They're like, all right, Eric. Look,
yeah.
Here's the interesting part about that. We talked about this before the podcast and mindset. And I was talking about, this group of doctors that I was with this week. And there was something interesting about them because, I think that there's I'm going to go out somewhere and then I'm going to come back with it. In the United States, we don't get taught to negotiate well. And there's a lot of cultures where negotiation is a natural way to communicate, and it's all negotiation. I remember overseas, especially in the military, I went to a lot of places where you haggled at a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's just the way it was. And interestingly enough, I see that in when people are negotiating, their pay, and people are negotiating whatever, they get angry. They get like there's like a bitterness that comes out, like, because we get taught how to negotiate on TV. We don't know how to negotiate. I say that because there's a reason. I'm going follow my thought process for a moment. So what happens is people. I often see this in a negotiations. People seem angry. They seem like they're just angry at the world because that's how they feel like they have to negotiate. But what happens oftentimes is that person loses the job. They don't get the opportunity, and they feel vindicated because they stood their ground. But what ends up happening is the person did not control their emotional intelligence. Their emotional intelligence, or EQ, was low, and they weren't able to have a conversation without bringing this person into the conversation that was not themselves. Well, interestingly enough, and by the way, that's because they don't want to get taken advantage of, right? I get it. But I also see the best doctors in the world, right? See, the people that are struggling still at 600-800 grand, they're the same people. They're just they guard the walls from anybody. They won't listen to anybody. They won't talk to anybody. They won't open up a conversation because heaven forbid they might get sold something, right? So so they got this giant wall up. Well, the best of the best people, right? They control their mindset, and I think that's what's most important. Is like, and the point of the Joe Rogan thing is that people are now allowing somebody else to control. When we did the leadership retreat, hundreds and hundreds of people in the room, and I remember this guy says, I make other people happy. And I remember saying, like, you can't make somebody else happy. You can't. Good God. And I said, I spend hard enough time trying to make myself happy, let alone trying to make everybody else happy. You can't do that. Now, you can create programs that support them, and you can create an amazing place to work, but you can't make somebody happy or unhappy. You have no control of their childhood, no control of their sleep patterns. You have no control of the traffic. And the same thing about being quick to anger or quick to frustration is that, it's like people are looking sometimes for a reason to be upset. Now, why does this have to do with dentistry and mindset? Because success is a mindset. It's a choice. When I sit in front of these doctors that are, all, multiple locations, quite a few locations, they're all huge. And it's interesting because they're all some of the nicest people you will ever meet. And I said this before. I said, I started doing a correlation between great people and success. It was pretty interesting to watch, like the most successful people. And I would liken that back to, they just control their emotions. That's the difference. It's the ability, and how big is the ability to weigh in to control your emotions on your success. And it's controlling your emotions around, right, working with consultants and working with people and hiring team members and getting pissed off because your patient showed up later, whatever it is, right? It's this ability to control emotions. And I think what we're seeing through the Joe Rogan podcast is that, there's an outcome that somebody wants, but instead of communicating the outcome, they've decided to throw a temper tantrum instead. Yeah. And I'm not really sure that's the best way to communicate.
And they didn't really look into the situation either. And I think we see with a lot of our, most successful practices, they don't stress the little things. The little things is what I see that causes the ones that are either a startup, or if they're not at the $1 million mark yet, or if they're just over the $1 million, they stress the small stuff. They let other things, and I know we've done an entire workshop before where you presented on the fact of, guard your bucket, guard your mindset. Don't let other stuff come into your mindset. Always be looking for more information, but if you don't agree with it, don't let it ruin your day and cause you to go out of your way and not focus on your core mission. And I think that's what, people are doing right now. They're focusing on the wrong thing. He had a conversation.
I was talking to one of our doctors in Scottsdale, and we had this conversation about event plus response equals outcome. All right, I'll say that again. Event plus response equals outcome. And we were having this conversation because ultimately we control, right? The event happens, whatever the event. Someone came on Joe Rogan's podcast, they said something controversial, right? But you control your response to that, right? Whatever it is, you control your own spots. There's levels of this. And by the way, there is a huge correlation between your ability to control your emotions and success. Yeah. And, there is this idea that, yes, their events happened, things happened, but we've seen people. I mean, I saw someone on Facebook or whatever the other day. He was born with no arms and no legs, and he was talking about, or no, that's not true. He got bacteria, and it flesh-eating bacteria, and he lost his arms and legs. That's what I was going to say. But he was talking about how great his life is, and he was talking about the benefit. He was talking about all the amazing things that he has, and that he found this as a blessing in his life. And he was talking about the blessings. Event plus response equals outcome. Now, a lot of people could have that same thing happen and ultimately destroy their life, destroy everything. Well, that happens in business too. And I see it correlate so well with success, is because the difference between the most successful people is there's an event happens, but they control the response. They get to control their response. Nobody can make you angry. Nobody can make you jealous. Nobody can make you happy. Nobody can do those things. I don't care what happens. Yeah. It's really it's really up to you to determine the outcome. And what I see when I work with the top dentists in the country, and I'm serious, I was talking to one of our dentists recently, and I said, tell me where you rate your production as far as the entire country. He said, top 10. I said, top 10%? He said, no, top 10. Top 10 doctors. And by the way, he is. If I told you the number, it'd blow your mind. The whole point is, these are the top doctors in the country. And they're saying event plus response equals outcome. That ultimately speaking, we all have control of the response, not the events. The events happen to us. Yeah. DSOs move in, DSOs move out, right? Market changes, insurance come in, insurance comes out, COVID happens. You got into a fight with your spouse, somebody quit. All these things happen to us, but it's ultimately they happen for us. So you get this response and you get to pick it. Well, I see this huge correlation in that, and that's what's crazy about that podcast is that what could have happened is that Neil Young could have went on the podcast. By the way, he could have said, Joe, I'd love to come on your podcast. I'm really upset about this, whatever. He probably could have come on the podcast. He could have had a different response, which is, I believe this is misinformation. I want to have the opportunity to come on your podcast, or he might say then, I'm going to leverage my music, but to say, hey, listen, I want to ultimately have the opportunity to come on your podcast and discuss my frustrations, which probably Joe Rogan would have said, that's fine. Come on, let's talk.
Yeah, he's open to it. He's mentioned that. He's like, if you don't agree with something, just reach out and then we can have you on the podcast. That's why he has so many differing opinions. It's so that he can have people are going to agree and some people aren't going to agree, but he's going to have other people on the show to have the conversation with. It's up to you to determine how does that correlate to you? Is this really going to affect my day this much that I go into work with a bad attitude because I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast? Well, I guess you're probably, and we've seen this, is like when you start looking at things negatively, you typically have that mindset all the time. And it's one of the hardest things to correct. And, we've seen that with doctors is just, it's simply you. Like the biggest issue with your business, with your practice, with your growth is you and your mindset. And we've seen practices triple just by changing their mindset and not letting outside negativity or things they don't agree with. They just don't bother. Like it comes down to, is this a priority of mine? No. Well, then don't worry about it.
Well, I'll tell you, and I think I mentioned on this podcast, I'll never forget years ago, I had, 2 offices, both had quite a few front desk people quit the same day. One of them was in tears, devastated. It was like the worst thing that ever happened. The other one, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, wow, the response, look at the difference in response. By the way, one is 10 times more successful than the other. Isn't that interesting? Well, of course, because they control their own response. And I think success is the same way. We have a series of things that come to us, and we get to control what we do with those resources. And the mental resources are the most important thing to control. I will tell you this, and I know they listen to this podcast. Some of the people that get they get the biggest results, they just implement. They don't come back and go, well, I didn't do it because. It was interesting, I had told them to basically find this one group. I told them to go find a full-time doctor recruiter, and I just spoke to them, and they were like, "Yeah, we've got like 40 candidates, 40 doctors." Where somebody sits there and goes, well, I don't have any. We don't have anybody. There's no good doctors out there. You can't find anybody. Recruiting firms are too much. Response. That's the event is I lack doctors. The response is to honestly throw a little temper tantrum. There's nobody out there. Recruiters are too much. Nobody can find anybody. We're all in the same boat. Versus doing something about it and saying, well, what could we do? I was talking to last week. I had a conversation actually in Scottsdale with a gentleman not in the dental industry. And we were talking about this idea of how do you hire world-class people. And so he owned a staffing firm. It's a gigantic staffing firm. So I called him up. Event plus response equals outcome. I just said to him, hey, I got a question for you. I said, when you had a staffing firm, how did you find the best of the best? What tools did you use, right? And he was telling me about athletes and how he targeted athletes and the way he did it and how they proved why he picked certain people. Because he was saying in his entire career that he's seen people be great at leadership and good at sales, or great at sales and good at leadership, but very few people are great and great. And so he said that was really hard, but how did he find people that were more statistically likely to be successful? And so we were talking through this. And so what ends up happening is we were talking about how to build a world-class team. And we can decide the outcome. Believe it or not, a lot of us go back to child mentality when we hit a struggle. When we go back to struggle, we go back to our safe place, which is like childhood. And I'm not trying to beat up anyone. I'm just saying, because we all do it, by the way. Like we all do it at some point, right? So, I might have done it 5 minutes ago. I don't know. At some point, people are going to do that. My whole point is that it's really control your emotions. One of the things I've told people when they start creating these stories in their head, and this is one of the greatest things I ever heard, which is you ask yourself a pretty simple thing, right? Is it true? Right? Can I absolutely know it's true? How do I act when I believe this? And what would I be without that thought? Here's the thing. People start to decide that, hey, this is the truth. They create a truth that's not even the truth. And then once they do that, they solidify it and shut down. Or if they'd open up, because that's what happened. That's one of the things I've taught, is that people go through a process where they ultimately create a story and then they shut down. So Neil Young has created this entire story. And then he shared the story. That's what people do. They go get people on their side, and then he shut down. Versus what he could have done, just to respond to him and said, "Hey Joe, I'm pretty upset. I listened to your podcast today. I was pretty frustrated. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'd love to get on your podcast and talk about it." See, he could have had that response, and now all of a sudden, then you got people on the bandwagon. Joni Mitchell now is like, "I'm quitting too," right? How many other irrelevant artists are going to jump on the bandwagon? I mean, here's the thing. Well, I know Joni Mitchell has some good songs. Okay, see, someone just got upset. Like event plus outcome. They were like, I love Joni Mitchell. Calm down. I'm just kidding. But you need to understand is that everybody gets to control their emotion. You get to control your response to that information. I'm an emotional, passionate person, right? That has a lot of benefits, but it can have some negatives too, right? Some people are very stoic, right? And they never get upset. That has some good things and some bad things too. And so, but we control our emotions. And I think that's really important when we think about something like this, is that you're watching grown-ups act like complete babies. What does this have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with, because I see it in the dental world all the time. I see grown men and women acting like children. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I've acted like a child plenty of times too, okay? This is all of us in a group reflecting and saying, don't get offended, okay? Event plus outcome, response equals outcome, is that where do you go when it becomes challenging?
Yeah.
What is your safe space when you hear bad news, when the person quits, when something costs more than you thought it was going to cost, when you've hit the roadblock, when there's not as much cash as you thought, whatever it ends up being, whatever that struggle is, where do you go? Where is your safe place? What is that place that you go to mentally? Because that matters. And then how can you push that up? Yeah. One of the reasons why I put really talented people in rooms together is because one of the things I always tell people, I'm like, listen, if you're stuck at 2.5 million, all I got to do is put you in a room with people doing 10 million and watch your revenues grow. Now, I say that and it always works. And here's why I tell people that. I tell people that because what happens is not the only thing that changed was their mindset. Because when they watched these other people and watched how they control their emotions through these other things, they start to mimic that behavior, and then they get the same outcome. So believe it or not, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we don't want to hang out with people who are not successful. And successful, what I mean is in business sense, if they're not hitting the numbers you want to hit, then quit hanging out with them, at least from a business standpoint. You can talk to them about, something else, but when it comes to business, I would be careful about who puts whatever they put in your cup. Be careful who's putting it in your cup, because you're drinking that stuff, and that has a huge impact on your success. It really does.
Yeah. I mean, stop asking those type of people for advice. I mean, I think like the whole mindset thing is, when people call into Tower Leadership, I can automatically tell what their mindset is when they get on the phone with me. I have them fill out this questionnaire, and if someone leaves a lot of them blank. I already know what their mindset is. It's kind of funny that I've seen the direct correlation on how people fill out a simple questionnaire to the success that they are as an organization. I get on the phone sometimes and people are like, well, I just had, Aspen move in across the street. They're going to undercut me on all these prices and all this. And it's just a mindset. Instead of thinking about what they're going to do, how do you power through? How do you control what you're going to do to make sure you kick butt and take names? And it's the same way with, a lot of times people chase too, where they see their buddies doing these crazy numbers and all this, and they just beat themselves up because they feel like they're so far behind, rather than like what we're talking about. Why don't you ask that person, what is it that you're doing differently? One of the reasons why you have your leaders level group is so that these individuals can get together and they have such successful businesses, is that they can ask each other and ask the questions that they wouldn't normally ask other people. So I think that ultimately, we're talking about mindset here. And and you say this all the time during your presentations, is it's one of the key factors to ultimately you being successful is 100% your mindset. I mean, you go down the bookstore and there's thousands of books on mindset, because that's truly how you become successful, is controlling your mindset. Be positive, see the positive things in like how you look at certain situations. It's almost like you got to train yourself to be an optimist. You do. You have to really shield yourself from all the negative energy that's going to make you go about your day differently. And that's what we see, our best practices all shield themselves from that type of stuff. They focus on the positives. What could they do better? What mindset do I need to have going into this day to pump up the team, to get them motivated? We got these people coming in. What do we need to do? They're asking different questions than the typical practice that's just like trying to get through the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always see this mindset. I think that it comes up over and over again. And this was just a good example of it, because, I love it that people are throwing a fit and just not controlling their emotions instead of just having a conversation. And by the way, if you're Joe Rogan's producer, you're the happiest person in the world right now. You're like, everyone's talking about my podcast. Yay!
Yeah,
This is great. I mean, you
views
just made
are
it
up.
twice as valuable. Yeah, I mean, now you just made it twice as valuable. I mean, good thing, right? And so, I think it's what we can take from this is I like that, is that you control your response to any given stimulus. Like you control your actions. You get to control that. But people see that around you, and they see how you control, and the entire environment will be controlled by that, right? It'll be controlled because they'll see that example, and so your leadership team will be in that conversation. But the biggest thing, and I wish I could get this through somehow. I wish I could, because it would change everything. Because if you could hang out with some of the doctors I hang out with and you could see what they do, it would change your mindset. And what I could tell you more than anything is that they just believe that they can. They never have stopped believing. I was actually just reading something from Jim Collins, and he was talking about the good to great organizations, and he was saying, the great organizations always believe, no matter what hurdle came their way, no matter what challenge, they always believed that they were going to be at the top of the mountain. They never stopped believing. But that's event plus response equals outcome. It's having a response to something and saying, I'm going to get there. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet, but I'm going to always fight. And so because of that, they kept moving. The people that are so worried about somebody, taking advantage of them, or they're so worried about whatever, what we call scarcity mindset, which is a response to stimulus. Never invest in themselves. They never invested, people are always surprised when I tell them I have multiple coaches, and they're like, you have multiple coaches? I'm like, well, why would? Yeah, of course I do. I mean, the best corporations in the world, I'm talking Coca-Cola, Home Depot, the best of the best, have consulting firms. Who do you think KPMG is, and Ernst & Young? And, so understand that the best of the best, watch what the best of the best do. They go get help. They get advice. They get people on the outside looking in. Yes, we should all do this, because that's what ultimately makes us better. We have to learn. We have to have the right mindset. And I would spend my time being around people with a great mindset. It really does move the needle in your business. So I would encourage you to think through this week, and think through your 2022. Think about what's coming up for you. Think about what challenges you're going to face. And what I want you to think about is that when this comes up, and you can kind of keep that in your mind, is I get to control my response. And so, how do I have the best year, ever? How is 2022 my best year? And when we're off, how do we respond to that? And what changes do we make? And I think that is where you need to focus, is that response to, right, is that response to whatever it is. Respond to the year, challenging it. Respond to difficulties in the past with optimism. Go research, read the books, read the novels, get involved, find other people that are doing great things. You get to do that. You get to spend your time. Yes, you could spend your time on the couch if you want to, or you can spend I'm always surprised by people who are like, yeah, I spent all day Thursday in front of the golf course. I'm like, well, no wonder your business is stuck. Now, look, I think for some people, they're like, look, this is my best life. My best life is playing golf all day Thursday and Friday, and that's my best life. Hey, that's fine. Look, if that's ultimately your best life, that's fine. But I would tell you that there's so much to do, and you get to decide what it is, and your mindset controls it. So don't let other people get into your brain, into your area, especially at conventions and stuff where basically it's a bunch of peer pressure.
Convention season is upon us.
Yeah, that's right. Control your emotions. Control how you react to stimulus. I think that's important. Is we control ourselves and we control the outcome, and you control your 2022 and what you do with it. You've got resources. Look, everyone's got resources. They're limited. They're limited in the fact of what you have, but to go get the resources, that is unlimited. You have the ability to go acquire unlimited resources. But it's going to be how you get there is ultimately your response to the stimulus. I will tell you, the very best people are humble, hungry, and smart. Are you still hungry? Do you want it? Do you want it better than anybody else? Are you humble? Are you still willing to learn? I work with some of the just incredible, gigantic practices, and they're always willing to listen. They're always willing to learn. As soon as someone says to me, yeah, we're already doing that. Oh my God. I've said on this podcast before, if you say I'm already doing that, oh my gosh, we're already doing all that. No, you're not. So that's mindset, right? So be willing to listen. How can I get better? How can I get better? The best just keep getting better. You've heard that before. That's because they're humble. They're willing to learn. They're willing to listen. By the way, we learn through repetition and immersion. So if you've heard it before, hear it again, apply it. Hear it again, apply it. Hear it again. Before you know it, it creates neural pathways. It's neuroplasticity is the way the brain operates, and you can create new neural pathways in the way you respond. And the way you respond to stimulus can change over time. So I encourage you in this year to work on your mindset. How do you improve it? How do you get better? How do you respond differently? And I'm not talking about to just challenges. I'm talking about to your obstacles in the way of your goals.
2022 is the year of the mindset. So
the year of I thought it was the year of the tiger.
All right. I think there's gonna be a lot of things that can control your mindset this year.
Hey, it's the year of the tiger, though. Hey, that's like I'm not gonna try to do a roar here, but but it is the year of the tiger, right? It's a Chinese year of the tiger. So
attack it. That's what that tells me. Attack 2022.
Attack 2022. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.